Hello, everyone, and welcome to Marvel-ous Movie Mondays with Kelsey and Dill. That's Kelsey. I'm Dill. Welcome to a supersized episode here of Marvel-ous Movie Mondays. We got so much to talk about, Kels. We got 2 episodes of television. We've got an entire a variety article that kind of threw everyone for a loop this week, even though some of it was a little foreseen. We got an Echo trailer, Werewolf by Nights in color now. There's a lot of shit going on right now, Kels, but how are you feeling 1 week removed from Halloween? How are you feeling as we settle into our favorite holidays month of Thanksgiving month being November? Kelsey, how you doing? How you feeling?
Well, Jill, I think I'm suffering a little bit from that cold that you had going on last week. So I
Mhm.
may be taking some time to mute myself to blow my nose,
Gotcha,
and
gotcha.
also to eat my breakfast because I'm absolutely starving. I just woke up. I'm so sorry.
Oh, I'm
Um,
so sorry, Kels. I would have given
and
you
no,
more
no,
time
no,
if you needed.
no, it's no
Okay.
worries because I had to because we had a function last night at my apartment, so I was like up late, like cleaning it, and then I had to wake up early to watch these episodes, and now I'm finally eating now at noon while we film this. But anyway,
Mhm.
honestly, Dill, I forget every time I do the 31 Fridays of Halloween how much time I actually have in my schedule when I'm not having to watch like multiple movies a day to keep up
Right.
with the, you know, watching a movie a day, everything, and
Right.
like especially like posting a video about every movie every day.
Right.
So
It
honestly, I
becomes
feel
almost like
like my
its own full-time job,
no,
like
literally, that's
yeah.
exactly what it is, on top of the full-time job that I already have. I'm working
Right.
2 jobs, and one of them's fully for free. Um, but yeah, I'm finding that I have a lot more free time, and it's a good thing because we like you said, we just got a lot of bombs dropped on us in the past week, and a
Right.
lot of interesting stuff to talk about today. Because I wanna know
Yeah.
all your thoughts and feelings and emotions towards the article that was written. Because I
Yes.
was kind of we've been digesting it now for, like, a
Right.
full week, so I feel like
Yeah, well
it's
well,
it's
let's
a good
start with
time to
that.
talk about it.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Variety magazine, the big cover, which was, like everyone's seen the cover of that article. It went around, and I don't have like a magazine like subscription. I wasn't able to get one, so I was like waiting for them to publish it online, and they finally did. And I think it's very very interesting. The article, I believe it's called what is it called? Is Marvel in Trouble is the cover of Variety. It looks like that. And kind of dives into like all the things that are going on with Marvel now because admittedly Marvel has been a big talking point when it comes to the actors strike and writers strike, and as we know the writers got a deal, but the actors are finally finalizing their deal. It should be done this week, but it's very interesting to kind of look at Marvel specifically because Marvel, when the Writers Guild kind of got their agreement, a lot came into light about how their shows were run and how their shows were kind of run improperly. There was no showrunner. It was kind of treated like mini movies, but because of that, the whole workload and the schedule and the pay was all off because admittedly making a TV show is a very different process than making a film because you're making something episodic. It's more workload, and they were treating it as just one big film, so they were trying to like cut corners that way. Then we finally got this article that kind of like summed up like all the problems, and I'll just kind of go through beat by beat what the biggest problems are. And the first one being Jonathan Majors, who has been obviously something we've talked about on this channel a lot. The idea that he is obviously going through a bunch of trials right now. And I think the main point that the article hit on really well is that whether he's innocent or guilty, his reputation is a different thing entirely. You can have a non-guilty verdict, but when everyone who went to high school and college with you is speaking out about how much of a raging dickhead you are, that is not helpful, even if you're playing the biggest villain in the MCU, because admittedly, everyone loves Tom Hiddleston. He was the biggest villain in phase one. Everyone loves Josh Brolin. He was the biggest villain for the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So like, the actors are still well respected, whereas here we're getting an actor who's not well respected anymore, or at least not by a significant amount of people, in this lead role that is not only a fundamental part of Loki, which we're watching right now that they couldn't reshoot because of the strikes, so they had to roll with what they have, but he's also set up to be the central figure of this next phase because they literally named the next Avengers film after him. So there's this whole thing. they talk about how whether there's a guilty or non-guilty verdict, there's a reputation at stake, and they are considering pivoting to perhaps centering around Doctor Doom or recasting entirely because we've seen it with Rhodey, we saw it with Hulk. They have done that, so that is one of the things. Yeah, a quote here says Marvel is truly fucked with the whole Kang angle, and they haven't had an opportunity to rewrite until very recently. But I don't see a path how they move forward with him. So it sounds almost like we're almost at a 75 to 80% chance that Jonathan Majors will not be a major role in the MCU going forward. And then it kind of talks about the profitability and the Marvels coming out. And this is another big kind of thing that dropped in the fact that Nia DaCosta was apparently kind of pushed out of the post-production phase of the Marvels. So she obviously filmed the movie, directed the movie, but then obviously, as we've heard from a lot of directors in the MCU, like the directors of Captain Marvel, like the director, like even Taika Waititi at times. Sometimes studio interference comes in and can kind of override a product. Eternals, the same thing. And some of those movies we love, obviously, but it sounds like Nia DaCosta had such a bad experience on the Marvels because of studio interference that she basically kind of dipped out during post-production because she wasn't really having her voice heard, and decided to start working on her next movie with Tessa Thompson. And a lot of it is a lot of people are standing up for her and not buying tickets to the Marvels, which is also leading to a snowball effect of really bad pre-order sales. And aside from Guardians 3, the past few Marvel movies have not been making as much money as they want. Black Panther Wakanda Forever made only like half the amount that Black Panther did, even though it was still a success. And then Quantumania was one of the lowest openings Marvel's ever had. So that was another talking point in regards to Nia DaCosta leaving, and also the fact that it is such a high budgeted movie and they're not expecting to make much money back on that. And then the third thing being the visual effects. Obviously, we've talked a lot about that, but in the idea that the visual effects department is trying to unionize to be able to strike against Marvel, that's something that they're in the process of doing. And the idea that these scenes in Quantumania, apparently Marvels was supposed to come out first. Quantumania was supposed to come out when the Marvels is, but because Quantumania was further along in terms of what they had filmed, they decided to rush Quantumania into production, which also forced a lot of the visual effects department to go into overdrive. And it says right here, there were at least 10 scenes where the visual effects had been added at the last minute and were out of focus. It was insane. I've never seen something like that in my entire career. Everyone was talking about it. Even the kids of executives were talking about it. So basically just like kind of overriding the visual effects department, saying, here, just throw this in there. We need to release the film. And 14-hour days with no overtime pay, $200 million budget, and they're still not getting what they deserve to be paid. They talk a lot about Victoria Alonso, and how they made her kind of a scapegoat when it came to the She-Hulk's visual effects, even though it's said that She-Hulk has had also a really tough time in the visual effects department. So I keep saying defects by accident, but it is kind of defects. So yeah, a lot of it just kind of stems to the idea that the business is not running as it used to post Endgame. Also, we had a pandemic. So post pandemic, it's not the same Marvel. And we're kind of seeing it with the quality. We've been positive on some things more than others. Secret Invasion, we both agreed, was the worst thing Marvel's ever done. And that was literally a few months ago. And then Loki, Kelsey's been loving it, but I personally haven't been loving this season very much. So like, I think it's one of those things now where we really, aside from Guardians 3, I think we're in a real rut. So I know I just talked a lot because I wanted Kelsey to eat her breakfast, and I want,
Yes, thank you.
because it was a
I was
giant
able,
article. That was all my
yeah,
bullet points, but the article is so much
yeah.
bigger. I implore all of you to check it out to kind of get the ins and outs. But Kelsey, what is your reaction to kind of all of
Well,
that?
I mean, they really make fair points. And like
Oh, absolutely.
I was
Yeah.
I was having a conversation about this with one of my friends at work, and I was, like we're here, we're not obviously professional critics. Like we don't have to love everything that the MCU puts out, but being a fan of the MCU, like I always want to look at it and take an optimistic angle. Like I'd rather, take like from certain projects, like take away the things that I thought they did successfully and the things that I liked, rather than just harp on like everything that was like obviously like bad and they were lacking in.
Mm,
But when, this article really like came for the MCU's neck, and I think maybe in a good way, I guess. Like, I feel like maybe this will kinda light a fire under whoever is asked to kind of, like, make some really big, like, serious changes here if they want the MCU to, like, stand, like, with its reputation that it once had, like,
Mm,
in a during, like, the Infinity Saga, the Infinity War, like, Endgame days, like, that was when, like, Marvel was really, like, at its prime, and, I thought it was really interesting, Dill, that they basically had like just basically said like the MCU is just too like Kevin Feige at this point is just too extended. Like he can't give every project the time and attention that every project needs that he likes to be in that post-production room. Obviously, he makes his tweaks and he does what needs to be done so that we have a coherent um MCU, and it's worked for the first 10 years of this franchise. And now all of a sudden, like the wheels are starting to fall off the wagon here. And it's because, they did introduce the Disney Plus shows, and now we have all this like Marvel content that they're
mhm,
pumping out. It also sounded like when they were talking about the pandemic that Disney kind of really wanted to rely on the MCU and the fact that they had so many projects lined up that they were like, great, we have all this stuff that's either like been filmed or like, in the post-production stage. Like we can still keep making movies even in this like pandemic world
mhm.
because of like this machine that we have like pumping, underneath us. And I think one of the more shocking points that I read from the article that you didn't bring up, Dill, was the fact that they were considering bringing back, Robert Downey Jr. and Scarlett
Yes,
Johansson.
I didn't bring that up only because I didn't know if that was like a spoiler necessarily. Because actually, since
Oh,
that article was posted in the last 24 hours, apparently Robert Downey Jr. has said he would return, and that's kind of the scary part too. Because I get it, and you're right, that is a bullet point I wrote down that I just forgot to bring up. But it's like I just
oh,
don't
no
know.
worries.
I personally read that and was like, now I get it. You're suffering with money and you're suffering with like needing to get people back in the theaters or back on track. But I think there's also an artistic element to it where if you keep bringing characters back that died, I know that's what they do in the comics, but the comics also have been
Mhm,
spanning for decades, not just for
mhm.
20 years. We're not even 20 years into the MCU. How much are we? We're 15 now, right? 15, I think.
Yeah, yeah, that's
I
math,
don't
I
know math.
think.
I can't do math, but yeah, like 14 to 15 years. I just think that is not a great choice. I don't know. If they do like spin-offs and like prequels like they did with Black Widow maybe, but like to just say that their deaths like just bring another multiversal version in and saying their deaths don't matter, all that thing. I guess
Right.
the deaths matter, but I just think that
I
cheapens an
mean,
Endgame, which did feel like such a perfect final moment. I mean, that was one of the things that
yes.
got me angry because I was also like, Robert Downey Jr. is doing really well now. Like he's in
Yeah.
Oppenheimer, he's going to start to actually like expand his career into other horizons at this later stage of his life. And Scarlett Johansson too, I think, has the opportunity. I mean, she got after Endgame, she got 2 Oscar nominations in the same year for Jojo Rabbit and Marriage Story. Like these actors should be able to kind of go beyond.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Olsen, they literally confirmed they released this book recently too, the MCU timeline or whatever, and they confirmed that Scarlet Witch did die in Multiverse of Madness, and that is now confirmed canon by Kevin Feige himself, who wrote the book. And now Elizabeth Olsen is free to do work. Like I like that the actors are now kind of
Mhm.
being freed to go do their own thing, and it feels like having to keep bringing them back it doesn't feel like it adds any artistic merit. It's just solely there for the profit of it all. And if they want to come back, that's different. But it feels like they're just throwing money at these stars, hoping that they're gonna warrant people to come back in the theaters and see the movies. But Black Widow didn't do great in theaters either, though. So I don't necessarily know if
Mhm.
I think they're trying to bring them back so they can do an Avengers thing with all 6 of them. But at that point, like, I don't know. I just don't know if that's
I
the
don't
right
know,
choice.
just well, the way that they talk about it, like, in interviews, like, they all are obviously very grateful for their time in the MCU, but they
Yeah.
all seem and feel very done. Like, I don't see Scarlett Johansson coming back. I've heard Chris Evans say that, like, he doesn't wanna, like, go back. Like, it'll take a
Because they all
lot.
got such good closure. I mean,
Right.
Thor has a kid, Thor's happy. Hawkeye had passed it on to Kate Bishop, and now he's with his wife, he's happy. Black Widow
Mhm.
died. Iron Man died. Cap is an old man, he's happy. Like, that's the only thing. The
Yeah.
only one who doesn't have any sort of closure is that all 6 that I mentioned?
No,
Yeah.
you're forgetting
Oh, Hulk.
Hulk.
Yeah, and Hulk is
but
the only
he's
one that
still
I
in
think,
it.
and he never really got his, like, own solo show, Mark Ruffalo, but even then, Mark
Right.
Ruffalo is probably gonna get an Oscar nomination this year for Poor Things, so, like, he's even able to kind of, like, go on. He doesn't need the MCU necessarily, and there's now She-Hulk,
Yeah.
so, like, you don't need, you know, even
What
Spider-Man, he had a perfect ending now in No Way Home. I don't even think you need to continue with him, but we know we're getting another trilogy.
right. What my biggest issue is with it is that it's just such a slap in the face to, like, the actors and the projects that they have currently that, like, they're not willing to, like, work on or improve or enhance in any way. They're like, "Okay, well, we just gotta bring Iron Man back because, like, box office sales have not been great, and,
Exactly.
like, we just need to like, we need to bring in Robert, like, he's, like, the only like, he's our saving grace, like, he's gonna get us
Mhm.
out of this hole." But it's
Yeah.
like, no, just, like, the work that you're doing right now and the projects and the content that you're making now should be like not only just as good as like Iron Man from back in 2008, but it should be better. We're 15 years into
Right,
this and like
right.
we should have like figured it out by now what the fandom wants, what audience wants, like how to not only like appease the fandom that you've had for 10 plus years, but also how to draw in a larger fan base because with the MCU, it's tricky because eventually, like, people age out of it, and
Mhm.
it's like you either get like, adult fans that read the comic books growing up and like, want to see their characters brought to life on screen. But if you're not doing that but you have to do it for the adults that read the comic books, but you're also making a superhero movie, so it has
Right.
to appease to children as well. And it's just this weird middle ground that I feel like we've definitely not like achieved within the past like few projects. The
Yeah.
all of phase 4 and now this beginning of phase 5, like you said, Dill, the only like light at the end of this tunnel has really been Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and we just lost James Gunn to fucking DC. So it's like what
Right.
what are we gonna do?
Well, and it's also like you think about stardom, and a lot of the big MCU stars weren't huge stars beforehand. Robert Downey Jr. just like gotten out
Mhm.
of rehab. He was technically, when he got cast as Iron Man, he was, people were going, Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, same that as they did with like Heath Ledger as the Joker. You don't see these
Mhm.
people in these roles. Chris Evans had a successful rom com career, but hadn't really been a mainstream actor before this. Same as Chris Hemsworth. I think the thing is they don't need to keep relying on the stars they have. They just need to keep making new stars. And I think it's possible with
Mhm.
Iman Vellani. Soshi Gomez is on Dancing with the Stars right now. And she's amazing and people are becoming fans of her. If you give her a solo movie, people might want to support it. That's the thing, is like they need to rely on the storytelling first. The casting, stunt casting only gets you so far, because how many people actually go to the movies for a specific star? Legitimately. The only few examples I can think of lately is like people probably went to see No Hard Feelings for Jennifer Lawrence because it was the first time Jennifer Lawrence was doing a comedy. People went to see
Mhm.
Mission Impossible and Top Gun because of Tom Cruise, because they wanted to see what stunts he would do. There aren't a lot of actors though like that who can just bring people to the theaters because of who they are. Like
Mhm.
I don't think people were going to see Everything Everywhere All at Once because it was Michelle Yeoh. I love Michelle Yeoh, but that's not why the mainstream audiences were going. They heard it was good, they thought it looked cool, and they saw it. It had nothing to
Mhm.
do with the stars in it, and now those stars are bigger stars because of it. Yes, Michelle Yeoh, Ki Hoi Kwan, but they weren't going to the movies to see them as much as they were to
Yeah.
see the movie. And I think that's where Marvel's misguided, because in the olden days, people weren't going to see Iron Man for Robert Downey Jr. They weren't going to see the Incredible Hulk for Edward Norton. They still didn't go see the Incredible Hulk regardless, but that's not my point. They're not going to the movies for the stars. They're going to the movies for the characters and for the stories. So when you keep bringing these actors back relying on star power, what if it fails? What if you do bring Robert Downey Jr. back and then that movie doesn't do well? Then you're kind of screwed, because not only do you not have the money now, but now Avengers Endgame has less of an impact. So now you're ruining your past work. You're making that
Yeah.
less impactful and less important.
Yeah.
I really think that's dangerous, and I think maybe Deadpool 3 could help save the MCU because you're bringing back Hugh
Mhm.
Jackman, but the same thing, if that fails, then, like, does Logan have as much power as it does, considering we see Hugh Jackman again in the role? That's kinda my worry, and I hope they
Mhm.
don't bring the two of them back, Robert Downey Jr. and Scarlett Johansson. Also, because I do think they should be able to get out their own work, and I hope Robert Downey Jr. wins the Oscar, like many people are predicting. Because I think if he wins
Mhm.
the Oscar for Oppenheimer, he will seriously be able to just continue doing his own stuff. And I think
Mhm.
that's another thing too, as we saw with Barbie and Oppenheimer, people are now willing to go to the theaters for stuff that isn't Marvel. Like Marvel movies aren't the only big
Yeah.
blockbusters anymore. Barbie sold 3 times as much as Quantumania, and I think that's also showing a shift. In 2012, when the Avengers came out, that was such a craze that for the next 8 years, that followed. But now we might be in a different time period where also generations shift, and the people going to the theaters might wanna see Barbie and Oppenheimer more than they wanna see the Avengers, because Barbie is this really powerful feminist piece, and you've got a lot of people who want to like see movies like that with a female voice, and some people want to see Oppenheimer because they're engaged in the political science of it all. Like, I think there's something really interesting about the big movies that are making a lot of money. Super Mario Bros. Too. It's not necessarily as nuanced, but it's something new and fresh, and people are excited to see it. I think that's the thing is like I don't necessarily know if star power is going to bring in people. I think genuinely just the pop culture is shifting. And when you put so
Mm.
much stock in Disney Plus, how many people actually bought a Disney Plus account that didn't have one to watch these shows? I think a lot of people who had Disney Plus kept it, obviously, but I don't necessarily know if telling someone who's more of a casual fan who still sees all the movies but doesn't necessarily like dive into it like us, I could see a world where someone's just like, I'm not gonna go watch the shows though. That's 8 hours each that I have to commit
Mhm.
to. And I think that's a problem
Yeah.
too. I
That's
think
another yeah,
that
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
hurt them, I think, because it's now such a big commitment that and
Yes.
you can't see a movie standalone. That's why Guardians 3 did so well, because you only needed to see the first 2 Guardians and maybe Infinity War and Endgame. That's 5
Yeah.
movies versus now if you wanted to see if you want to see the Marvels, what do you have to watch? You have to watch WandaVision, you have to watch Miss Marvel, you have to watch Captain Marvel, you have to watch Secret Invasion. That's at least 15, 16 hours. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Because that's the critique that I hear time and time again for people who aren't like MCU fans, like couldn't like don't have absolutely no idea what's going on in the MCU. They're like, yeah, but if I in order for me to understand what's going on right now, present day in the MCU, I have to watch 30 plus movies. Like
Mhm.
that's insane. Like I don't have the time and energy to commit all that just to be caught up to what's going on like right now. And I'm like, that's super fair. I mean, I was able to do that back in 20 like, what was it, like 2015, 2016 when we watched Infinity War together. I caught up to Infinity War, and that's
Yeah,
what
2018 was when Infinity War came out, so a
oh,
little
yeah,
later. But
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
you're so right.
But even then, you
Oh
had
my
seen
god.
Guardians before that, right? You had seen
Yeah, yeah,
Guardians, and
I
you understood it perfectly.
yes,
Yes, you didn't get the
yeah,
post-credit scene in the Dark World where they're explaining the Collector and the Infinity Stones, but you don't need to. And I think that's the problem
right,
is so everything's so interconnected, and it kinda makes you kind of almost appreciate how scaled back it used to be, you know?
yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, it's just yeah,
2016 was when I watched 2015, 2016 was when I watched Guardians for the first time, that's what I was
right,
thinking of.
yeah,
But Dill, it's interesting that you bring up the problem with specifically the Disney Plus shows because to me, it felt like what the article was kind of like how I interpreted the article and what I thought that it was kind of alluding to was the fact that maybe they get rid of all of the Disney Plus shows from like now on just because they've realized that they bit off a little bit more that they can chew and they just
mhm,
continue to make movies from here on out.
right,
Like I feel
right,
like that's maybe a solution that's being toyed around with in like the Marvel, you know, production team, whatever. Also, I don't know how like this person knew everything. They were like, "Oh, they got went to their trip on Palm Springs and this is everything that was discussed."
Well,
But then
I
like they
believe
couldn't get a direct quote from like Kevin Feige
well,
or
that's the
like
thing,
whatever.
and that's where the journalism world is a little weird, and you have to take it with a grain of salt, but I also think it's a lot of, like, people have been coming forward and speaking out about this, and then when they want the comment from the kind of negatory side of it, that's when they fail to comment. I do think there's a lot of
Yeah.
truth in it, though, and I obviously, like, how do they know these things? Because people come forward and speak out. It's like this is a very big leap, but in the movie, she said when they're talking about the Weinstein thing, like all the women came forward to speak out. They didn't give their names because they were
Mm,
afraid. And then Harvey
mm,
Weinstein failed to comment. It feels like that too. There's probably a lot of people who came forward that didn't want to give their names because they didn't
sure.
want to lose their careers. But then also
Yeah.
Feige failed to comment, so it makes it seem a little bit disingenuous. But I do believe it, and even if I don't believe every single, maybe not everything is 100% truthful, like I still think the whole Jonathan Majors thing is an issue. I think the whole
Yeah.
budget thing, visual effects, is still an issue. Like the issues are still very clear. It's just the details we might get a little bit further confirmation. Another thing I forgot to mention, Blade. Apparently Mahershala Ali was ready to go. Like he was ready to walk.
Yeah.
He was like, I'm
Yeah.
done. Because apparently they like went through like 4 or 5 different directors and rewrites and all these things. And then apparently they said one of the versions of the scripts that they settled on before the strike had Blade as like the fourth most
Yeah.
prominent character in the movie.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm like, huh? It would be like if you
But
made an
he's
Iron Man
the
movie with
title.
Happy Hogan and Pepper Potts, and then Iron Man comes in later. Like, and I think that's a
Yeah,
problem.
yeah,
And
yeah.
they actually said that they're actually starting from square one again, rewriting a script and budgeting it under $100 million. And I think that's really interesting because I honestly think one of the ways to save the MCU, if you really want, low budget. Go back to the Raimi days, the Raimi Spider-Man days, where everything was very practical, where like visual
Mhm.
effects were not a like and you weren't putting all your faith into visual effects. They were more like a crutch when you needed it rather than
Mhm.
relying fully on it. And I think that could be a really interesting way to kind of pivot this and maybe move forward, is do a lot less projects in general per year and a lot smaller budget, so you can really just kind of like get to the storytelling of it all. Because like look at Captain America the Winter Soldier. There are some visual effects there with like the helicarriers and all that stuff, but a lot of it is just like hand to hand
Yeah.
combat, a lot of like on the
Yeah.
streets action. Black Widow could have been that, and then they put the whole final battle up in the air, her falling with all the shrapnel, and it looked atrocious. But like, that's the
Yeah.
kind of storytelling you might want to go back to for now. I know it's cool to have all the cosmic stuff going on, but even then, the cosmic stuff, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, all those makeup effects were practical. So you can still do the cosmic stuff practically. But I think there needs to be kind of a scale back to the original kind of phase one feel of there's not a lot of visual effects going on. And the visual effects that are going on are subtle enough to where they're supporting visual effects, not leading visual effects. I think that
Yeah.
might be a good first place to start, and Blade might be a good kind of test of that. And if that works, then maybe we can tell some more of these stories. Because like, look at Werewolf by Night. That was a low budget. Like things like that, I think could be really interesting. And we see it. This could be a good transition point to Echo. The Echo trailer. A lot of people thought it looked really good. You know why? Because there wasn't a lot of CGI. It
Yeah.
wasn't trying to really connect to too much. I mean, obviously Kingpin's in there and stuff, but it kind of feels like it's her own story. Just from
Mhm.
watching the trailer, it looks like her own story. And they're making it very violent. It's got the first ever TV MA rating of any Marvel show, and I think that's kind
Mhm.
of a good telltale that they at least want to try something different now and see what sticks. And I think that could be a
Yeah.
really good step as well.
So
But
do
yeah,
you think we're in like a trial and error? Sorry, I always say that word
trial and
wrong
error
because
era.
my
Error
Jersey
is short.
accent always comes out when I
Yeah,
say the word error.
era.
Sorry, a trial and error era of the MCU, like, they're just, like, trying out a bunch of different things and, like, seeing what works.
Probably. And
Like, I that makes me feel like a guinea pig.
the problem is, I think
Is
what
that
they want to do right now, they want to bring in the X-Men, they want to bring in Fantastic Four, they're doing the Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars. They probably should have done the trial and error earlier. Like they probably should
Yeah.
have made phase 5 the trial and error, but instead now, or phase 4, now instead
Mhm.
they're doing phase 5. And I think it's just almost too little too late, but that's what they need to do,
Yeah.
I think, right now is trial and error, because
So
right now it's nothing except for Guardians 3 has landed. The only other thing that people are talking about with Marvel is Sony. It's Spider-Verse. It's not anything to do with Disney. So
right.
yeah.
So, do you think, Dale, then the answer is casting that wide net and, like, going like, "Okay, then we're making a Fantastic Four movie, and we're tying in the X-Men because, Miss Marvel, it was revealed to have, like, mutant genes at the end of that, and now we're doing this thing and that thing," and doing everything, like, almost all at once? Or do you think they, like, take a breath, step back, choose to focus on one thing, and make that thing like as best as they can, like Infinity War quality, like content, characters, whatever, and just like put that out and like see how that goes.
I think that would be the right move. The only problem is
That's
I
not what they're
think
gonna do.
Jonathan Majors is honestly the biggest problem with that, because they could
Yeah.
just go, let's just wrap up the Kang storyline
Yeah.
now instead of drawing it out and trying to make everything
Yeah.
build up. Let's just get there now. But I don't think they can do that right now because they don't know what the hell they're going to do with that. You know?
I mean, I don't understand why that's so like such a like a controversial like decision to make. Like they like you said at the beginning, like they've recasted roles like all the time. And like I feel like, we went from watching Terrence Howard to Don Cheadle in the span of two Iron Man movies, and
Yeah.
we didn't really bat an eye. Like we weren't like it wasn't a
Yeah. I
big
think
I
it's,
guess because of the
yeah.
controversy around him that
And
makes
it's
it
the
a big
profile
topic
of the
of
character too.
conversation.
I think it's because he's like, they literally just said he's gonna be the figurehead of the MCU, and they had just made Quantumania and Loki season 1. I think if this had happened a year ago before Quantumania, and you're able to kind of fix the end of Quantumania in some way, I think it would have been a little bit better. But I think
Mhm.
because you already did Quantumania, And he even dies in Quantumania, but then they have to go the extra mile at the post credits and be like, but there's a million more. I think if they had been able, if this scandal had happened 6 months earlier and they were able to cut that post credit scene and instead make it like cast another actor and have him come in and be like, I'm a variant, that would have been better. But I think the problem is that it happened literally, it was the worst timing for that, I think. So that's just, I think that's going to be the first hurdle, because I think you can't figure out what you're going to do with your franchise until you know exactly where you want the franchise to go. Because right now the plan is Kang, and now they need to rethink that. So if it is Doctor Doom, then maybe focus on making the Fantastic Four first, make it amazing, and make that the Doctor Doom introduction, and then kind of plan around that. Because with X-Men, you have time if you want to do like a movie about these X-Men, then these X-Men, and these X-Men, and almost have them kind of come together as the X-Men in like their own Avengers thing. Like maybe phase 6 could just be every movie is a different X-Men, a different mutant, and then the final movie of phase 6 is the X-Men where all of them come together. Kind of like what you did with phase 1 with the Avengers. Just do that again with the X-Men. That might be better, because again, I think the way they need to do is just kind of do these standalone stories. Echo should be good, hopefully good. They should keep going with what they're doing with that in terms of like telling these separate stories. And then once you have a lot of separate stories, then figure out how you're going to connect it. Don't start it from just like, okay, how are we going to connect this? Because I think that's the problem. I think that was the best thing about phase 1 is that the connection was only in the post-credit scenes, really. It was after Iron Man ended, there was a post-credit scene where Nick Fury approached him. After Incredible Hulk ended, there's a post-credit scene where Robert Downey Jr. approaches him. I think that's what they need to do. They can't just make it, you know, everything has to connect all the time. That's why we liked Eternals so much, because it wasn't trying to do that either. So I really think they need to just start with what heroes are we interested in telling stories about, and what are those stories going to be, and let's just tell those stories. Make a Blade movie and make it have nothing to do with the rest of the MCU. Like that's the thing. That's the thing they need to do, and then later figure out how to connect them instead of starting to connect them early. That would be my pitch, but I really have no idea. I think they're right now. It's a really rough point, and luckily we got a good Loki episode this week, so it's like hard to be too negative, but it's like, but even then I'm like, there's still one episode left and they could fumble the ball, because I feel like this is kind of where they needed to be in episode 1 or 2 rather than episode 5. But yeah.
2 things. I had one thing in my brain. Oh, first I have a really quick thought about Quantumania, and then I have one final question pertaining to the article, and then we can go into our Loki episodes, which are going to be quick because my notes are hasty this week, man.
I was gonna say, well, because this I think is a more exciting discussion, honestly. Because I think 100%. Loki, just blanket, Loki was interesting, but feels like very much set up for next week. But it's still a good setup for next week. But I agree. I think this is the main crux of, because honestly, this is the more important.
You know, we're talking about 2 episodes still, right?
Yeah, we can forget about the first one though.
You don't want to talk about episode 4? I'm
still mourning. It's tough. I lost my gal this week, but it's okay. Keep going.
All right, fair enough. So first of all, so they put from the article, it sounded like they put a lot of eggs in the basket of Quantumania. They were really banking on like this one going over super well, because this is where like we saw Kang at his best, and like this was his whole setup for like his whole like Avengers films and whatever, which was so strange because I'm like, you picked Ant-Man to do this? Like, I mean, like Scott is great and Paul Rudd is great, and like, but the Ant-Man movies are so wildly overlooked. Whether or not they're like actually like really solid MCU movies, that's a debate for another time. But like, they're just overlooked. They're forgotten about. Like, people forget about him. Like, they literally make that joke in Quantumania where he's walking around and they're like, "Oh, you're the bug guy, right? Spider-Man?"
Hello,
and he's
Spider-Man.
like, "Ant-Man." Yeah. But anyway, so the article made me honestly want to rewatch Quantumania, because I was like, were these visuals as bad as they say they are? Do I just watch every MCU project with rose-colored glasses? So I like went back and I was honestly like falling asleep when I started it. So I did fall asleep on it. But I did have a new thought when I watched it, which was that, and this probably means nothing, but I just wanted to bring it up anyway. So at the beginning of the movie, you know, it's when everything's going great for him. He's coming off of his "I just saved the world" high, and everyone's like greeting him. They're like, "Oh my God, it's the bug guy," whatever. He goes into the coffee shop. He's like, same order. Thanks for always having my usual. And then he goes to pay for it. He's like, oh no, like your money's no good here. Like, thanks for saving the world. And he's like, you guys are the best. And he gets his coffee. So then they come out of the quantum realm. They do the same ending montage again. But when he goes to get the coffee, it's $12. He's like, okay, $12. And that just made me think, I'm like, did Scott enter a different timeline where maybe he's not as respected as he usually is? And in this timeline, there's going to be a different He Who Remains. But anyway, again, probably means
it's
nothing.
a good, if that is a loophole, they could use it if they need to recast. My biggest thing was like, why have Ant-Man be the one who kills Kang? Because I get it, I love Ant-Man, but if that is going to be the guy who takes down the big bad of the rest of the MCU, if Ant-Man could take him down, then Hulk can take him down, then Captain Marvel could take him down. That's the thing. I think that was the problem.
Right.
If Kang kills Ant-Man and like kills Ant-Man, squashes him like a little bug that he is, Kang's a scarier villain. I think that would drive more people to the theaters because people would inevitably be spoiled and they would be like, oh shit, wait, I need to see this. I think the problem is having kind of the weak kind of underdog kill Kang. That should be the ending of Kang Dynasty. Have Ant-Man be the one to give the final blow in that, and that would be maybe a cathartic moment, David versus Goliath. But when you have it happen as the introduction, then you're supposed to set him up as a big bad. If Ant-Man could kill him, Ant-Man could kill him. And I think that was the biggest issue. Have Kang kill Ant-Man, and then it's like, oh shit, okay, who's he gonna kill next? Instead, it's, oh, we're gonna kill Kang, and then all the variants are gonna get revenge. But it's like, if Ant-Man can defeat Kang, then the Avengers should have no problem.
But
I think that was a big issue too.
It was
him and Hope killed him, but right, because they put him through that. I don't know. But still, it's like, I just think
weird.
It was misguided to show how weak Kang was in that movie. If you really want to set him up as the big bad,
right?
And what if it was like, what if? Yeah, I don't even know. Like Loki, Sylvie took him down too. Everyone's been killing Kang easily. Like, so it's like, is he a threat? Like that's the thing.
Well, that's the thing about Quantumania, is that he was supposed to be the worst one of them all. He was the exiled one, which I don't understand why the rest of his variants want to get revenge on his death if like they all thought that he was so bad that he needed to be exiled to the quantum realm. Like it just like doesn't make any sense. Like, oh, they killed the exile one. Like now let's go do something. Like what?
Yeah.
Like I don't know. Just weird choices all around.
Anyway,
and then
we need to move on, but what was your last question?
My last question pertaining to the article was one of the other criticisms that I get from people that are outside the MCU, and one of the major criticisms that the article touched upon was the fact that this market just might be getting oversaturated. So, Dill, my question for you is, are you having some MCU fatigue?
I've been having. You know me. I mean, I've been very vocal on this podcast. Again, we're not employed by Marvel, so we're allowed to speak freely. You know, we're not an official Marvel podcast that's sponsored by Marvel that needs to like kiss Marvel's ass. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I've been having Marvel fatigue since mid 2022, maybe. Maybe even earlier. Like I really think that first year of the Disney Plus shows was fine. You know, we got WandaVision, we got Loki. I think once like it hit the Miss Marvel and like She-Hulk, and I like She-Hulk, but like that whole phase where I feel like nothing was like standing out as must-see television. And then the movies themselves, like we got, what was 2022? We had just come off of No Way Home. We were getting oh gosh, what was 2022?
Moon Knight
was a show. What were the movies that year? Oh, Thor: Love and Thunder. Thor: Love and Thunder. I didn't like. Thor: Love and
Thunder.
And then
Quantumania.
That was the Morbius year, where I know it wasn't MCU, but like it was just like a string of things that I was just like very mellow on. Moonlight was the only thing I really liked, and even then there were some episodes I was like, you can give or take. I think that was when I really started to hit the fatigue, and I think honestly having a year off of it and then coming back strong with WandaVision was so exciting. But like you're never gonna get that again after that. In terms of like the magic and the spark and the we're back, baby. Oh, that was also Multiverse of Madness era. Yeah, so that whole era, 2022. Multiverse of Madness into Love and Thunder and Miss Marvel, like that kind of sunk me in a rut, I think. And I think that's kind of been when the fatigue has been setting in. But then Eternals is great. So it's like there's things that I like, but things I don't. It just I feel the fatigue is setting in. But then Guardians lifted it up again, and I think
Yeah.
that's the thing is they have the capability, and I think another thing which we kind of looked over a little bit was Nia DaCosta. I think you need to give the directors more control, because if the directors
Mhm.
have more control, you're going to get more individual efforts. I mean, look at uh, shoot, what am I going to say? Um, I don't know, but there's a lot of MCU things where you can feel like the director is making their movie and not an MCU movie. It goes back to First
Like
Avenger. It feels like a Joe
Sam
Johnston
Raimi
movie.
with
Same Raimi with Multiverse Madness. I didn't love the movie for the story, but I thought the visual stuff was cool, and I'd probably watch that again over a lot of others. I think that's the thing is they need to like find more interesting voices and voices who are going to be uninterrupted and like unfazed. And I think Nia DaCosta was a great choice, but then it seems like there's a lot of studio interference with that film, so I'm nervous. We're seeing it next week. I'm nervous, but yeah.
mm.
So that's next week. I can't believe it.
All this to say, I'm still very excited for the Marvels. I will say.
Yeah, I just kind of lost all hope, but we'll see. But
Well,
that's
I'm
good.
trying to be optimistic, Dill.
Well, that's good. Is I if it sucks, I'm gonna be a little less upset, and you're gonna be more upset because you had your hopes high, whereas my hopes are low. So if it's better than sucking, then like I'll like it more because I'll be more like, oh, that was better than I thought it'd be. So
Okay. Oh, so you're saying I should lower my expectations a little bit.
no, because if it's great, then you're great, then you're fine. But I also think it's a problem that this is the only MCU film right now to like wait till the day before it comes out to release the reviews. That's always a bad sign. That's what happened with Five Nights at Freddy's. Everyone was like, "Wait, why aren't the review embargoes up?" And it's like, "Oh, they're releasing it Thursday," and it came out Thursday. I was like, "Why are they waiting so long to drop the review embargo?" And then I was like, "Oh, because it sucks." So that's another telltale sign. If the studio doesn't let critics release their reviews
Mm.
early, it means it might be bad. But hey, I will be optimistic in the fact that I'm still excited to see it because at least it's not an 8-hour series commitment. At least I know I'm just going to see it, and then whether I like it or not, I'll be out of the theater in 2
Mhm.
hours. And we're getting more Brie Larson, which means like my eyes are going to have a fun time.
My God,
Because
Dill.
I think she's one of the most radiant women in the world. Like she's just such a inside and out. She's just such a great spirit that I'm just excited to see more of her because she's one of my favorite actresses. That's what I meant.
Okay. Yeah, you really saved yourself there. All right, let's jump in now to Loki episode 4 from 2 weeks ago. It's
Mm,
titled The Heart of the TVA, or in what I like to call it, stating the obvious, because everything that was kind of that we kind of assumed was going on.
what?
Are you going to be like this the whole episode? You're just going to
What?
keep putting Miss Minutes on the screen?
I didn't do anything.
What do you mean?
You
What
said
do you mean?
you
What?
said heart of the
Don't.
TVA, so she had to show up.
Okay. Um, so yes, everything that we assumed was going on in the TVA basically gets confirmed in this episode. And oh boy, let's just jump right in. So we start this episode. We are back where we left off at the end of episode 3 with Renslayer and Miss Minutes at the end of time, where basically we find out it is confirmed to us. I shouldn't even say we find out because we knew this like 3 episodes ago.
Yeah.
It's confirmed that Renslayer did once upon a time work with He Who Remains. They were going to run the TVA together and basically, I don't know, take over the world. But she goes back to the TVA. He calls Miss Minutes and says, all right, Protocol 42, let's wipe their memories. And then he just like starts from scratch, doing whatever he's doing. He's a
Which
bad
again,
guy.
what a bad cliffhanger for her to be like, I know this dirt on you, and then immediately
Yeah.
it's like, oh, we knew that.
It was a pretty cool shot, though, I will say, of where Loki lacks in, like, I guess, plot. It makes up for itself in, like, style and
Oh yeah.
cinematography
Oh,
and
100%.
set design and all that fun stuff. Like, it's
No,
if anything, Loki is very fun to look at, like Brie Larson is for you, Dill.
mhm.
Um,
Well, yeah, it's the best styled show, period.
yeah.
And we especially see that with episode 5, but like the style in the show makes you wonder if the visual effects rumors had ever been true. It really just shows like,
Mhm.
oh, this is what happens when people put time and care into something.
Well, because I
Um,
think, Loki is a show that requires very minimal stuff, like visually wise, because Loki hasn't really been using his magic. It's if
Right.
anything, they're just opening up those portal doors and walking through. Like
Right.
we haven't seen anything too huge, you know,
Yeah.
yet since
Well, yeah, yeah,
until
until
episode 5.
yeah, episode
Um,
5, there's a lot of shit going on, but I think
yeah,
that's a good
yeah,
thing. What you're saying is they're saving their
yeah,
budget for that. It's how you utilize your budget. It doesn't need to
yeah,
be you don't need a bigger budget. You just need to utilize the budget you have. And
exactly.
yeah, I just think this series is just so visually dazzling that like I have been low on the first 4 episodes of this show. Episode 5 is a different story. I freaking loved it. But like
Mm,
first 4 episodes, I said I'll tell you my analogy later that I made on Twitter, but like
okay.
it's very much like regardless of how I felt about those episodes, the visual stuff is always 100%. Like I'm really enjoying the visual scope of things to where it's like they could literally just be like the script, they could just be speaking gibberish and I'd still probably like this more than like
Yeah,
10 of the other series,
yeah. Um, so yes, like I was saying that made us go off on this whole tangent was that the shot of her looking at the memory with like her behind them, and then like it's almost like she was looking into like a tiny little dollhouse of like
Mhm.
the scene between her and He Who Remains. So yeah, I thought that was a cool shot.
Yeah,
Anyway,
very.
so now Victor Timely is finally at the TVA, and Loki and Mobius are able to convince him to come with them to help them with the temporal loom, all that jazz. Um, and then we kind of get the scene between the older TVA agent who is at the judge's quarter. I don't know her name, but it's the other TVA agent who isn't Docs, the Scottish one. It's
Mhm.
the older, sweeter one who's on Hunter B-15's side and says, "You know what? You changed my mind. I'm willing that to bet that you can change Docs's mind as well. So why don't you just go talk to her?" And that's exactly what B-15 does later on. Um, one of my favorite moments from this episode was when Obi meets Victor Timely and they kind of have this fangirl moment when they realize that they both inspired each other to write the TVA manual. And they're like, "Will you sign my copy?" "No, will you sign mine?" And then, they don't get to the signing because they have more pressing matters to attend to.
Mm.
Um, Obi creates this cute little model of like the temporal loom and what they need to do to carry out their plan, which is essentially he has made a multiplier that needs to be put into this thing at the end of the catwalk called the launcher. And they need to launch the multiplier at the temporal loom to make the rings bigger so that more timelines fit through the temporal loom. And that's as simple as an explanation as I can make it. But OB has this great moment with Mobius where he's like, it's not really finished, and I only got one coat of paint on it, so I'm kind of embarrassed that Victor Timely's here and he's looking at my model, which is a great model, but OB is just being a little, he's just being his little extra OB self. And Mobius is like, "Hey, don't beat yourself up. Like it looks great." And we just see like Mobius, OB, like have this cute little like grin on his face, like he's so proud of himself. Like, oh, it
Mhm.
was just a sweet little moment I wanted to include. Um, so, but basically, they come to the conclusion that Obi needs something else to make the multiplier work better. So Victor Timely's like, "Oh, I have the perfect little doohickey right here," and that's the technical name. That's what I wrote down in my notes, doohickey. Um, and he gives that to OB and is like, "Hey, try this on the multiplier. Let's see if it works." While they're working on this, Mobius suggests, like, "All right, they're fixing that. Let's go get some pie and just wait," which
Mhm.
pisses Sylvie off. She's like, "What are you talking about? Like, sit around and eat pie and wait. Like, you're just so content here because, like, clocks don't tick at the TVA. Like, nothing bad's going to happen to you. But, like, while we're sitting around eating pie and waiting, like, there's timelines that are getting destroyed and that people are dying. So, like, great. I'm glad that this is everyone's attitude here." And so she basically has this whole scene with Loki where she tells him, like, "We should have just burned this place to the ground when we had the chance. Like all these people would still be alive, like all these timelines wouldn't be getting destroyed." And he's like, "Yeah, because, destroying things and burning things to the ground, like that's easy, but like putting in work and fixing everything, that's the hard part." And like that's the part that we're not good at is Loki's. It's like we'd much rather destroy and annihilate and be evil, where being good is the harder option, which is why we don't do it. And she's like, "Well, you just want to work here at the TVA and play God." To which Loki responds, and this is also one of my favorite moments. Um, "We are gods." And then he walks out of the room all like Loki like. He's like, "Well, we are gods. Like, let me
Hmm.
just remind you." And to this conversation was making me very reminiscent. I don't know why, but it was reminding me a lot of like American politics and how people are like, we just need to like start from scratch and like do whatever. And like Loki really like feels like he's coming from the place of like, yeah, we could, but like that's going to be really hard. Where like if we just vote for Joe Biden and we like do what we
Right.
can with him, that's better than like anarchy kind of
Hmm.
thing. And like that's just that was my little Joe Biden analogy that scene made me think of. So then we cut to a prison room where Bradley and Docs and like all of their Minutemen are being held. And Brad's like, "Listen, like we need to get back out on the timeline. We need to rebel. We need to get out of this place. Like I need to get back to my timeline." And Docs is like, "Sit down. Like we've been caught. Just like shut up. Like our purpose is here, and like whoever's in charge of the TVA, like that's who I'm gonna work for, and like my place is here. So like relax with your little rebellion. Like that's never gonna happen." And this is when B-15 enters and is like, "Hey, like we both want to fight for this place. We both care about this place. Like, let's just join forces and reinvent the TVA the best way that we can." And Docs, it seems like she's really gonna take her up on her offer. Like she's really gonna consider until Dill, crazy scene. Renslayer comes into the prison and is like, "No, actually, don't listen to her because she's trying to change the TVA. I'm trying to get it back to its former glory where we were just pruning and killing at the drop of a hat, and that is why you need to come work for me. And basically, everyone who wants to come work with me can, and the rest of you, well, I'm just gonna have to kill you." And every the only person that takes Renslayer up on her offer is Bradley because he wants to get back to being the actor Brad Wolf starring in the
Hmm.
movie Zaniac. And everyone else stands with Docs and chooses death over working with Renslayer. And they get smushed into the box, and you
Yeah.
hear the awful screams, and you hear people getting smushed. And
Mm.
Miss Minutes, she's loving it. She's watching. She's like,
Oh,
"Oh
I
my
love
god,
that shot.
I shot my
She's like,
popcorn with me. This is amazing." No, she loved it. She loved that moment.
oh yeah, she was digging
Makes
it.
me
And
wonder
uh,
your taste in women, Dill. She's a sociopath.
what can I say?
So then we cut back to Victor and Obi working on the multiplier for the temporal loom, yada yada. And Mobius comes back with a cup of hot cocoa, and for some reason, Victor Timely fucking needs this hot cocoa. He's so
hot,
enthralled by
hot,
it. He needs to.
hot cocoa, hot
I'm
cocoa,
like, "Oh
cocoa.
my god, Jill, it's infuriating." I'm like, "Just say words. Just like say the
Yeah,
words."
I'll be honest. I don't like Jonathan Major's performance in this role, or at least this season. It's just a little too put on. You know what I mean?
No,
Like the Shakespearean stuff worked for Kang and Quantumania, but here I'm just like, it's kind of like Jamie Foxx in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. If you know, you know.
Mm. Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. I just feel like when we first met this version of him as He Who Remains in season 1 of Loki, like he was just like a regular guy. Like, yeah, he had some theatrics about him, but like he spoke like full sentences. But I feel like every other variant we've watched of him now, like all of his sentences are said like this. And I'm like,
Yeah.
just
Yes.
get to the just get to the end of
Did,
the
did you
sentence, please.
did you say hot cocoa? Like, I feel like that's the
It
Shakespeare training in him. But again,
it
you don't
grinds
have
my
Shakespeare
gears.
writing this dialogue either, so it's hard, you know.
Exactly. So like just say the words, dude. It's not that serious. You're in a Marvel show on Disney Plus. Like just say the words.
Hmm.
Um
And it's probably your last, so maybe he's just soaking it in, you know,
yeah, he's trying to take up as much screen time as possible.
before he
Um
loses it all.
so Miss Minutes starts locking everybody out of the system. Everyone's trying to open up their temp pads and they're
Boss.
like, sorry, access denied or whatever. Then we cut to Victor finally getting his cup of hot cocoa, and he's with one of the TVA agents. I don't know his name, But I called him Pug in episode 1, and
Yeah,
therefore his name is just Pug. He looks like Pug. He
he
gives
does.
Pug energy. He's Pug.
Could be a
So
variant.
Pug gets killed. Could be a variant. Oh my god, that'd be amazing, actually.
Yeah, this side character
So
that had this one line was a variant. Yeah, that'd be cool.
all right, moving on. But we're not gonna talk about Pug anymore because he actually gets killed in this scene
Yeah,
by
pretty
Hunter
brutal.
X5, aka Bradley. So he takes
Brad.
Victor to Renslayer, and they start like striking up some sort of arrangement where they're like, you're gonna help us and I'm gonna help you. And he's like, well, I have a deal I can make with you ladies. Um, to which I was like, oh great, so Victor's gonna be playing both sides here and he's untrustworthy, whatever. But he wasn't though. Like they didn't even make a strong choice with that. Anyway, um, we're almost done. Obi reboots. Oh yeah, so then Obi's only choice to be able to like get back to working on the temporal loom is that he's going to have to reset the whole system, which is going to get rid of Miss Minute's AI as we know it. I'm so sorry, Dill. But if he reboots the system, it's going to cancel out all the defenses without throughout the TVA, which means that Sylvie and Loki are going to be able to use their magic. To which they respond, "Please shut it down, then, because we'll be able to like do this much more efficiently if we have our powers." So using their powers, look, Sylvie enchants Hunter X5 and he prunes Renslayer. By doing that, they're able to get um, Victor back to the temporal loom, to where he volunteers to be the one to go out on the catwalk and shoot the multiplier into the launcher at the temporal loom. But as soon as he steps out of the doors, he gets turned into spaghetti. He gets like his
Reed Richards,
limbs starts. He gets Reed Richard did,
John
and
Krasinski. Yeah,
he John Krasinski, circa Multiverse of Madness, and he dies instantly. And then the episode ends with them freaking out about what happened because the temporal radiation was just too much. And we zoom in on Loki's face and the TVA like explodes, it seems.
hmm.
So then we move on to go ahead, Dill. What do you have to say about episode 4? I'm
No,
sorry.
I was just saying. I just think this was purely like one of those bridge episodes that we talk about where it was
Mm-hmm.
like not a lot
Mm-hmm.
happened, but a
But a
lot
lot
happened.
happened. Yeah.
But like, what does it mean? I think a lot of the discussion has to do with episode 5 in terms of my whole thoughts on the first 4 episodes
Yeah.
entirely. But yeah, rest in peace to my girl. Pour one out for her.
Yeah.
Man, I hope I mean, I guess that's it for her. And that's my biggest complaint. I'll say it now. You've been setting up all these 4 episodes, and now Timely, Ravonna, and Miss Minutes are just out of the picture now. Like that's it. Like I just feel like that's
Right.
a little weird.
That's yes. That's
And
what I
like
was
we're
talking
gonna
about.
get more probably in episode 6 about something, but it just felt like
Yeah.
it honestly felt like you could have done the pilot, because now we actually understand that the time jumping is important. So I take back what I said about that. Remember how I was like, you fixed your problem in 1 episode. That's dumb. Like, why even introduce the problem of time jumping if you're gonna have it over in the first episode? I was wrong with that. We get more time jumping in episode 5, so I will rescind my criticism there. But we could have gotten like episode 1, then episode 2 could have been like a quick bit of the Victor Timely stuff, and then episode 3 could have been this episode here, 4 and 5 together. Like I feel like this could have been shorter. Now, Kelsey,
Mm-hmm.
my whole thing is like, oh, where was I going with this? I forgot what I was about. Oh yeah, why did we need to send Miss Minutes and Ravonna all the way to the end of time to know something we already did for them to only just come back to the TVA anyway? Like that just seemed unnecessary. It almost feels like they're doing too much to get us to a point that we could have just skipped right to. You know what I mean?
That's what I mean, Dill. Like this is kind of the episode. Like I kind of like I finished watching this episode and I was like, okay, great. So nothing means nothing. Like everything just meant nothing. Like leading up because everything kind of like Victor's gone, Renslayer's gone. It meant nothing that we learned that they used to work together and that she got her
Well,
time wiped.
technically, as we find out in the beginning of episode 5, they're all gone except for Loki. Like all these characters as we know them, except for Loki and
Right.
Sylvie, are gone technically. They're
When
variants in their regular time layers, timelines.
when when is the moment from episode 1? When does that come back? Doesn't that come back in this episode?
No, the next
Yes, what? No, it happens in this episode because while they're trying to get to Victor before they can, like, use their magic and prune Renslayer, and before that happens, they remember Sylvie gets stuck in the elevator, so then,
Oh, the
Loki,
phone
like,
call.
takes
Yeah.
Yes, the phone call. Right, because Obi was the one that was calling them to tell him that he needed to, like, shut down the defenses, and then Sylvie gets stuck in the elevator, and then we cut back to the events of episode 1, and we find out that episode 1 Loki comes running in. Sylvie's prying open the elevator. She sees episode 1 Loki and is like, "Oh, there you are." And then we find out because remember I made the point of saying I think it was Mobius who pruned him, but I wasn't 100% sure. And we find out in this episode that it was present day Loki pruning past Loki.
Yeah. No,
So
I
that
this
he
is
could
this
stop
is
the
some
time
cool stuff.
slipping.
Like I like this stuff. Like this
That
stuff
was
is really
cool,
cool.
yes.
And I think that's what we get a lot of in the next episode too. I have a theory, but I'll wait till we finish the next episode recap to theorize. I think this episode had one important moment that I think a lot of people looked over that we'll talk about after the next one. So let's recap the next one,
Okay,
then I'll give you my main
sure.
theory as to who the real villain of the series is.
Okay, so episode 5, titled Science/Fiction. So basically we start this episode right where we ended the last one, and Loki is he time slips again, and he time slips like right before the blast actually goes off, but this time it's only him that's in the TVA. So I'm not sure where everyone else went, or if he's in the future and now everyone's dead, or what happened, but we're no longer in the immediate danger that we once were in at the end of episode 4. And so then we jump to the intro plays of Loki's name, and it's different. I don't know if you skipped it, Dill, but I'll tell you.
If it's not AI, I'm not skipping it.
So the letters go for Loki as they change in their different little fonts, but towards the end of the title card, the letters in his name disappear, and then they all come back, which it's never done before. So I was like, the title card was a little different today. So then we jump to Casey's timeline, and we find out that he's actually a prisoner escaping Alcatraz, and that his name is Frank, which is so funny. I like the little play on history that they did, back from season 1 when they did the whole DB Cooper bit. I like that they're yes, and like Mount Vesuvius and all that, and I like that they're once again doing a little play on history. I also like that Casey's like real life on the timeline is completely different to how he acts the TVA. I love the juxtaposition there. So then Loki's doing a bunch of different time jumping. He's going to a bunch of different places, and he actually time jumps to the time theater that we first met Loki first met Mobius in season 1, where he showed him all the time clips of him being a bad person, and he ended up crying, like yada yada. We remember. We've time slipped to B15's timeline, where we find out that she's a doctor in New York. And then we finally get our answer about who Mobius is on the timeline, and it turns out that he is a salesman at a super sports store called Piranha Power Sports, and his specialty is selling jet skis, and that his person on the timeline, whose name is Don, has 2 sons and loves jet skis, and that he lives in Cleveland, Ohio in the year 2022.
Which is famous for really not having much water near it, right?
I think maybe there's a lake in Ohio. I think there's
the Great Lakes are a good drive, but like still a few hours. I honestly thought this was a little underwhelming. I was expecting a more emotional payoff at the jet ski moment, but it was cool. I mean, it was fun to see him finally interacting with jet skis, but I was expecting that to be like one of the final shots of this whole series and me to get really emotional over it, but maybe it'll still happen. I don't know.
Maybe he'll actually ride one, because we still haven't seen him on water. He's just in the store with them.
Well, I think that's the humor of it too, is that he sells jet skis in a town where they don't have water.
Right. So then we time jump to Ouroboros' timeline, and he's a failing author. He's just trying to sell his science fiction novel, but the bookstore won't let him sell his books, and he's trying to buy his own book, and and then he drops all of his books because he gets thrown out of the bookstore, and it was just breaking my heart. I never
Yeah.
want to see OB in pain
Keely
ever, ever,
Kwan
ever.
Keely Kwan really sold this really well. Like just such a
Yeah.
good scene. Yeah.
So when he meets Loki, every time Loki time slips to a timeline, he tries to explain to people what's going on, and everyone's just as confused as you would imagine they'd be. But when he meets OB, OB is psyched. He's like, "Oh my god, this is one of my characters from my book came to life and it's talking to me now." Like he's like he's on board. He's down for whatever. So he basically explains to him what's going on, and uh, OB says, "Well, we in order for all this to work, like we need to get everyone back together. We need to get the band back together because we need everyone's temporal aura in the same place." So that we can use that as a kind of coordinates to time slip back into the TVA. But in order to do that, we need one of the temp pads. And since we don't have a temp pad, it's probably not going to happen for us. Loki unfortunately doesn't have a time pad, but what he does have on him is the TVA manual. And Ouroboros is like, "Great, I have all the information I need to make one of these temp pads." Um, so then Loki goes, "Oh, and OB tells him, well, you really need to work on the time slipping because you obviously have some control over it because you've only been time slipping to places where all of your friends are and everyone who you need to help. Like that's where you've been going. So part of you has some sort of control over this. You just need to master the control,
Mm.
which will help a lot." And so Loki convinces Mobius to come with him. We meet both of his sons in this scene. He shows he shows Loki his garage where he has the two jet skis and is like, "Hey, I only need one. My wife is long gone." So we find out that he is a widower.
Mm.
Very sad. And Loki is just like, "You need to come with me. Like your children are in danger. If you come and you help me, like I promise, like you can come back to this point on the timeline and be with your boys healthy, happy, and safe." And OB arrives just at the right moment in time to kind of convince Mobius that everything that Loki's saying is true, is because he has kind of like a prototype, like generation one temp pad that's huge. Kind of think back to like how big and bulky like the first iPhones were. It's kind of like reminiscent of that. He has this
Mhm.
huge temp pad where he's like, "Oh wow," Loki's like, "Wow, you made that so quickly." And he's like, "I don't know if I would say quickly. It did take me 18 months. Well, 19 months. I did have to take 1 month off because I lost my job and my wife left me." So it just like trauma dumps on us in one sentence, which is just amazing.
Mhm.
And so basically Loki gets the whole gang back together to like Ouroboros's kind of like shop slash home slash I don't know
Mm.
what this is. And the last person
Hmm.
he needs to convince to join them is, what are you taking notes about,
I'm
Dill?
keeping track of things you're saying. That's gonna help my overall argument later. Continue.
Okay, I'm excited. Oh no. Okay, I'm excited. Um So the last person he needs to get on board is Sylvie. And so he time slips to Sylvie's timeline where she's working at the McDonald's, as we know. And he's like, "Hey, this is going to sound crazy, but I need your help. I know you don't know who I am." And she's like, "Of course I know who you are. Like, what do you want?" And he's like, "Well, you need to come with me because, like, I need your help again saving the TVA. I am once again," it's like that meme of Bernie Sanders. "I
Right.
am once again asking for your help to save the TVA." And Sylvie's like, "Listen, like, let's just go get a drink and like, let's talk about this." So she basically tells him, "Listen, you should just fuck the TVA and like live your own life because that's what I'm doing. I've never been happier. That's the goal for all of this is that like we just want to live and like we'll be better off without the TVA." And she's like, "What do you want, Loki? I want to live a life, and that's what I'm doing." And Loki's like, "Well, I want to stop He Who Remains." And she's like, "No, that's not what you want." And he's like, "Okay, I want to save the TVA." She's like, "No, try again." And he's like, "I want all my friends back together." And she's like, "Great. So now we're getting somewhere.
So now you're
So
selfish.
so now you're just as selfish as me, basically, because you're
Mm.
ripping all these people off their timelines just so you can hang out with them, basically." Which I don't understand where Sylvie's coming from in this moment because as we see in this episode, her timeline gets disintegrated.
I don't think she knows that though. I don't think she knows they're all
Like,
getting disintegrated
no,
because
but
that's ultimately what makes her come help
she
is because she
said
sees
it in the
everything.
last episode, Dill. She was like, the timelines are just are are getting destroyed, people are dying, and you guys are sitting around eating pie. Like, she knows what's going on. And when
Is
she
this a
brought
past
out
version of her though?
no, I think this is all the same version of
Oh,
her, I
I don't
think.
know then. Yeah, then it's just a weird continuity thing.
So it's just like weird that she has this like, well, my timeline's gonna be fine though. Like she knows what's going on at the TVA,
Yeah.
that like
Well,
everything's getting destroyed.
this whole series I've been kind of questioning. I'm like, wait, who are we supposed to agree with? Are we supposed to agree with Sylvie that everyone should be out able to live their own timelines and not be trapped in the TVA? But then Loki's like, no, we need the TVA because the timelines are disappearing. So it's like, then he tries saying how it's like this choice, like everyone should be given the choice of whether they are at the TVA or not. And I guess that would make sense. But then they're showing obviously Mobius's life is much happier in real life than it is in the TVA, right? He's
Yeah.
got 2 kids, he's got the jet skis. Whereas like someone like Frank's life, he's a prisoner in Alcatraz. Maybe the TVA is a better life for him. So like I think that's where I was kind of like, oh, okay. So this is what they're trying to say is that it's not that we need either the TVA or the branch timelines, but we need to be able to give people a choice. It was just a little weird. I still don't know what I'm supposed to, where
Yeah.
this is going in
Well,
terms of that respect. But
I
because
think
obviously they're showing that the TVA is important because these timelines are fading away. But then
yeah.
I like to think that the show would be preaching the whole let them live their lives free of the TVA thing. So I don't really know.
So basically what ends up happening though, Dill, is that her timeline disintegrating, and in case you were curious, it disintegrates to the song "Oh Sweet Nothing" by the Velvet Undergrounds. That's the
Yes,
record that she's listening to at the
which as I alluded
record
to
store.
earlier, is the most interesting scene in 20 years of Marvel visually. I think it's the
Yes.
coolest visual effects I've ever seen in a Marvel thing. Just the coffee cup turning into like the little spaghetti and then the guy running after her and she's got the headphones on. That whole
Yeah,
sequence was
yeah, yeah.
so good. I'm like,
Yeah.
this is what we've been missing. Like shit like that. Just this is so cool. In
Yeah.
any not much Marvel. This is the coolest thing ever.
Mhm. And so her timeline disintegrates. She goes to wherever Loki is with OB and is like, it's there's nowhere left to go, basically. And then, Loki kind of, has this moment beforehand where he's like, you know what, guys, like, I'm so sorry. Like, I pulled you all from your timelines, but like, the plan is off. Just like go home and like live your lives. But then they all start dying as well. They all start being getting turned into spaghetti. And Loki has this moment where the last person he watched turns turns to dust, basically. I mean, I don't want to compare this to visually, it's very different and much more interesting than like the snap was in
But it's the
Infinity
exact
War.
same thing.
But
Yeah.
it's the same concept. And so I'll say dusted for lack of a better term. The last person that he watches get dusted is Sylvie. And that is the moment that he's able to control the time slipping. And he time slips back to the moment right before they all start dying. And he turns to OB and he says, it's not about the what or the why or the how. It's about the who. And it's all circling back to the one person he wants to help and the one person he cares about and the one person he wants to be there for is Sylvie. In other words, himself. Um, and that's the end of the episode. It's
Yeah.
which drives me nuts because then we didn't need this whole episode of him like collecting his own version of the Avengers, getting them all together to then him just being able to time slip because what does he do right at the end of the episode?
Mm.
Time slips right back to the TVA.
I think it might have been one of those things where we needed to establish the character growth of him actually genuinely seeing these people in their real lives and
Mm,
having that moral dilemma of are they better off here on their own timelines or am I selfish? It's kind of the whole idea of he wants his friends back. And I think that was important for Loki in his growth.
okay.
I think this was a big growth episode for Loki, and that's why I liked it so much. On Twitter, I said this is the analogy I was going to make earlier. It's like
Okay.
if you're at a Mexican restaurant, you're eating really delicious chips and salsa, but you're eating it for like 4 weeks straight, and then finally they bring like a burrito over, and you're like, "Ooh, okay." That's how I felt watching this episode. I was like eating the chips and salsa. It was good. It tasted good, but it was like, okay, I'm waiting for more. Now I feel like we
Yeah.
finally got more. The problem is I wanted the burrito 4 weeks ago. Like I feel like
Okay.
this is where you could have opened the season with like, oh, now that the timelines are all fucked, let me look at I'm going to every single person's timeline. And then, oh, okay, now I'm in the present and I have this time jump ability. It feels like this could have been your pilot Like the
Mm.
first 4 episodes could have been condensed. Don't even include the timely stuff yet, and then have this be the thing. Like I think that's the problem is it's now just getting interesting and there's 1 episode left.
Oh, okay, I
You know what I
see.
mean?
I see your
Um,
issue.
but I love it. I really like this episode though, because I think it at least gave us something interesting, and like I thought that it was visually interesting. I was excited to see where it would go now. Now that he has this power, like the fact that he can time jump without a temp pad is like huge.
Mm.
And he can control it, like that's a really big power. And I think it showed a lot of great emotional growth for him too as a character. Like I think this was kind of what I've been waiting for the rest of the series to be. But yeah, what are your thoughts on all this?
Um, I mean, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching, where everyone was at on the timeline. I'm
Yeah,
glad we got to see a little snippet of Mobius's life, and I did enjoy the, conversation that, Loki and Sylvie had at the bar, and I thought that that was, interesting. But
yeah,
just, like, the little convoluted stuff for me that, like, doesn't make sense is, like, why Sylvie's so adamant about, like, living her life on the timeline when she knows that it's like, there's a very good chance that it's going to be destroyed. It was just, like, little things like that that, like, my brain just, like, couldn't move
right.
past
Yeah, and
because I'm
then
like,
yeah,
because as far as, like, what you were talking about earlier, Dill, about, like, who are we supposed to be rooting for and what are we supposed like, who are we supposed to be agreeing with, we're basically where I'm at this point is that, like, yes, the TVA should not have been operating this the way that it was, but, like, at the end of the day, they still need it in order to, like, keep all of the timelines alive.
mhm,
Um which is what Sylvie wasn't understanding. Like, she just thinks, like, if they really just truly got rid of it and, like, burned it down, like, who's to say that, like, all of the timelines wouldn't have just, like, crashed into each other and then there would have been nothing. You know what I
right.
mean? So at
Yeah,
least with the TVA, there was one timeline that people could
yeah.
live on.
Yeah, but then it's also like Loki's being like, I want all my friends back. But then he's like, I want them to have a choice between the TVA and their real life. But what if they all
Yeah.
choose their real life? Then you don't have them. Like that
Right.
was another convoluted thing. I get it. I
Right,
think talking
sure.
about it more, I'm not as high on the. I think I only left the episode very high because all these other episodes have been like, after they've ended, and this one I'm finally like, okay, cool, something's gonna happen. Um, Here's my theory. All right, so
Go ahead, lay it on me.
you had mentioned
I'm
in this
nervous.
episode you said something along the lines of, "Oh, just at the right moment in time, when Obi happened to just show up right at the perfect moment to convince Mobius to get on board." How
Okay.
ironic that he showed up at that moment at that exact time. You said you didn't know what it was, the place where Obi was living at. It looks
Yeah.
rather familiar, doesn't it? It looks almost similar to somewhere we've seen in the actual TVA itself. Um,
Yeah. I was
I
thinking that.
I was watching this episode, I was a little weary of Casey, but I honestly think Casey, by showing us that he was an Alcatraz prisoner, makes it seem even more plausible that he is actually genuinely good on the TVA, and how like sometimes the TVA can be better for someone like Casey than the regular world.
Mhm.
I think the show is trying to make you a little suspicious of Casey because there's really
Mhm.
someone else who might be up to some devious plans. Hear me out. I wrote some
Who are
notes down.
you Okay.
So Casey's like stealing stuff at the end of episode 5, but like
Yeah.
where are we in this sequence? Like, where does this gang group up together?
At Obi's, like, lab, I'm calling it,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
guess.
Why does his factory look so much like his office in the TVA,
It
Kels?
looks exactly like his office at
Okay.
the TVA, Dill.
Now he said the factory was abandoned, right?
Yeah,
There was
and
no
that there
one.
was no one around for miles.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know who also made a home off the grid?
Who?
Kang. In the comics, he
Oh,
makes a home off the grid with the Avengers. So like,
yeah.
how is all the tech there though?
Well, I think it's just like he accumulated it.
Yeah. How is he so good though at like just creating all this tech and creating all this stuff? Also, let me take you back an episode. What is when Obi says he needs to like make something and he needs someone like don't him and Kang have a moment together, or him and Victor Timely, don't they
Victory.
have a what do they say again? What is the moment they have together?
They're like, "Oh, will you sign my book?" Are you talking about that?
A little bit, yeah, but also don't they like agree to work on something together?
Yeah, the multiplier.
Yeah, and then what happens? Don't they handshake?
Yeah.
Okay, now a few episodes ago, Victor Timely said he doesn't do partnerships, right?
Mhm.
So why is he agreeing to a partnership now all of a sudden with OB? Now,
With
do you remember?
OB.
Do you remember in season 1 finale when Kang is showing how the TVA came about and he's doing the stuff on his desk and there's that like the image of the two guys shaking hands
Yeah.
and the other guy has glasses? They both have glasses.
Wait. From season 1, He Who
Yeah.
Remains?
Yeah, when he's
Yeah.
doing like all the images on his
Wait,
desk and
wait,
stuff.
wait.
There's like that handshake
Yes,
with like two
yeah,
guys
yeah.
that is identical to the handshake that OB and Kang or OB and Victor Timely have. Yeah, so Loki, yo, here's this book you wrote. Remember in episode 4, OB said, "I wrote this book based off of your work, Victor Timely." So they're nerding out at each other, right?
Mhm.
I think OB created the TVA. All right, I don't think Victor Timely did. What I think is, I think OB and Victor Timely kind of maybe created it together. But then remember how when we first met OB, he kept thinking he had seen something like this before or knew something, but couldn't remember really well.
Mhm.
Perhaps maybe, he built this TVA for his buddy Victor, and maybe Victor swiped his memory and maybe trapped him in this TVA.
Oh.
Now, this also kind of comes back to a question of like the kind of chicken or the egg. Who started the TVA? Was it OB? Was it Victor Timely? Was it both of them? Do you remember what Ouroboros stands for in like mythology? It's a snake that eats its
The
own tail,
snake
right?
eating its own tail.
Yeah. Okay. So I think you get where I'm going here.
Are
I think,
you are you
and
saying that OB's gonna stab me in the back after all
well,
this? After
not
me rooting for
necessarily, but
him and loving him this whole time?
I wonder if he's been stabbing people in the back and doesn't even realize it. I think
Mm.
maybe Victor Timely, in agreeing so quickly to a partnership with OB, maybe knew a little bit more than he let on. And OB's a writer. He just so happens to know that Loki has to control his time slipping. How does he know that? How does he say these are just like the characters in my book? These are just like the things in my book because they're his ideas. I think.
Ah.
I think there's two things. Either OB is being like it works with Victor Timely and then Timely turns on him and like wipes his memory and traps him in the TVA where he has to work in that basement forever where he can't leave.
Mhm.
Or is OB himself a variant of Kang?
Um,
Just think about it. Just think about it.
you're blowing my mind though. I mean, yeah, I think that that would definitely be, like, a great plot twist.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily want OB to be a bad guy because I like him so
I
much.
don't either, but also why would you cast Kiwi Kwan if it's gonna just be a little angel? He already plays a little angel and everything else. Maybe we subvert our expectations here, and to balance out a real criminal in the role of Kang, we give the complete opposite and give the nicest man alive the role of Kang as well. And maybe the reason they haven't commented on the Jonathan Majors stuff is because maybe at the end of the day, Kang is really gonna be Kiwi Kwan, and he is gonna be the Kang and Kang Dynasty that they all have to take down. Who
I
knows?
mean, that would be incredible, actually. That's, like, best case scenario, actually.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, also there's an idea of like why would OB then be helping Loki and all this stuff? I think it's because he sees that Sylvie killed Kang and now he needs to kind of put it all back together. And so in
mm,
order to do that, he needs Loki to be the one to control his time slipping to help him in the end. I really think there's more to OB. I think the fact that Ouroboros is a snake in real mythology says there might be something up with him, or I'm just
yeah,
overanalyzing it. But the handshake,
maybe.
as soon as they shook hands, I went, he doesn't do partnerships, and
Oh,
that's
you're
immediately
so
when I
right,
was like,
though.
damn. That's just what I was thinking of, and the thing is, honestly, the writer storyline, it's meant to make you feel a little sad, but he's being a little devious. He's saying, oh,
Yeah.
the barcode's not scanning. I can give you cash. Like it's
Mm,
very interesting. Oh, they're selling fast. He's a salesman. He's a little snake, a little bit,
okay.
a little bit.
Alright.
I'm just saying, keep
You're
your
really
eyes out. If
thinking out of the box. I
and
love it.
it may ruin it for you if there's a big reveal in episode 6. I'm sorry if I ruined it for anyone right now, but like
No.
I just think that's something very interesting food for thought because I'm trying to think
No,
about where every
100%.
piece of this comes together. Because honestly, this episode didn't have Miss Minutes, Ravonna, or Kang / Timely in it at all. So it's like, what is their relevance if the end of the story is just Loki, Sylvie, or Boris? Like, I feel like there has to be. I think the problem is we don't know what's really connecting it all. We don't really
Mhm.
know why we needed Ravonna in this season at all, and I think we might come to see why. Another thing I theorized from season 1 that Ravonna and Mobius had a thing. Maybe Mobius's wife didn't die. Maybe she was taken and brought to the TVA. Maybe it's Ravonna.
Maybe.
I don't know.
There's
That's a little bit harder just because of the way Marvel cast race and stuff. Maybe they would have had mixed race children if that was the case. I don't know, but it's just like other.
okay.
No, I just think 'cause
No, yeah,
a lot of people have been debunking it online because the kids are white, but I'm like, I don't necessarily know.
sure.
But again, all this stuff to think about. Where's your head at? Like going into the season finale, what do you think the season finale is going to be? Like, what do you think we're going to get out of this? Do you think we're going to be left open ended again, or do you think we're going to get a final like bow on this multiverse thing?
Well, Dill, what you're saying honestly makes a little bit of sense because at this point, like Obi's the only one that we have left to get answers from. Because unless they bring Renslayer and Miss Minutes back somehow for the last episode, like they're both gone. Victor Timely's gone. Like he's the only one that we can really rely on for any answers at the end of all of this. So if it does turns out that he knows more than he thinks that he knows, or that he did more in the past, and you know, have all these layers that you're talking about, then I'll be very impressed. Also be very impressed with you for calling this out
It was a handshake. As soon as the
predicting
handshake
this.
happened, I watched very intently on everything Obi did.
Mm,
Because the handshake just was really crazy. And then I went back and watched the first season finale just to see if there was any mention of OB, and it wasn't. But that image of them handshaking, and it doesn't look exactly like OB, obviously, because they probably hadn't cast it yet. But you know, why is
I
this
think
character popping up and being so important? If
this is
you know,
my prediction. I think that they're going to figure out a way to fix the TVA and to make it operate in a way where maybe they don't need anyone there, or maybe they like rig up Miss Minutes, because I don't think that she's gone. I think just as we knew her, that version is gone. And I think
gotcha.
that when she comes back, like when like the computer turns back on, she's gonna be like, "Hey, y'all," and she's just gonna be like a regular clock. Like I don't think she's gonna be as advanced and as like AI as she was. Like I
Spunky.
think she's gonna
Yeah.
be back to like her like first version of whatever she was. And maybe they rig her up so that like she can basically just run the TVA by herself, so that way they don't need any variants to work it, and then everyone goes back to their timelines.
That's a good idea. Yeah, and that might be
That's my
where we get the
prediction.
great Mobius jet ski shot. Yeah, I think the
Hopefully.
only interesting thing is if Ravonna and Miss Minutes aren't in it, then why did we spend 2 whole episodes focusing on that dynamic with Timely? You know what I mean? Like we're obviously
Yeah.
going to get more about Kang in the next episode, but it's like with Miss Minutes and Ravonna, I feel like that's where they've dropped the ball most, because it's like I feel like they didn't know really what to do with them, and I still don't know if they know what to do with them, you know? Um
Mhm.
so I'm very interested to see how it all wraps up, and how it looks like. I think this is one of those things where if it was a movie, it might be better because then we could kind of look at it as a whole, whereas now it's a series, so we still have missing pieces. And then once it ends, we'll be able to kind of look at it as a whole and see, you know, what the deal is. But any other thoughts on this?
No, that's it for me, Dill. I
Cool. Yeah.
loved,
So
talking with you today. We had
so
a lot of good points to discuss.
Yeah, so next week, it's one of those unfortunate things like when Black Widow came out where they just need to release the finale on the same day as they release a new movie.
I know.
So because the movie is in theaters, we are going to cover The Marvels next week, and then the week after you will get a review of Loki. And then I'm going on vacation. So we are going to kind of load up a lot of trivia matches, and then for most of December, you're just going to be getting a lot of trivia. So that's going to be pretty fun. And then January will come around. We'll start off with Echo and all that stuff. Echo is all dropping at once, but I figured maybe Kelsey and I will take it like 2 episodes at a time or something instead of just covering
Mhm.
all of them
Yes,
at
I
once.
did notice
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So that'll be so next week we'll get a Marvels review, and then the week after you'll have to wait for Loki, even though we're gonna record them kind of back to back because I have to leave on vacation. So a little
Mhm.
behind the scenes for Kelsey and I. But yeah, so that'll be that. You can find me at Dylan_Randazzo on Twitter if you want to see my chips and salsa burrito analogy in writing. Dylan Randazzo 417 at TikTok. Also the Dill Pickle Movie Network at TikTok. We're getting back in the swing of regular year, non-spooky season. So I'm just gonna be doing a bunch of like movie games and like rankings and videos. Kelsey, Chad, and Matt will be on there too, and Zach. So you can also check us out at the Dill Pickle Movie Network if you're listening on podcasts. If not, go check out the podcast Marvelous Movie Mondays and the Dill Pickle podcast. There's 2 podcasts. Kelsey, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Kelsey A. Kilpatrick, or you can follow me on TikTok at Kelsey A. Kilp.
There you go. Kelp. What Diet Dr. Kelp. That should be your next. That should be, oh my god, that's a perfect like If you
Shout
ever
out to
turn
my
if you turn heel in trivia, if you ever come out of retirement and turn heel, you should make your name evil
die Dr.
evil
Kilp.
Dr. Kilp, or something like that. I don't know. Anyway,
Maybe.
we gotta
Who
head out.
knows?
I got football to watch. It's Sunday. Oh, go buy Band on the Run t-shirts. The movie I'm in is coming out next year, and we're selling merch. Go on the Band on the Run Instagram page and check that out if you want to get merch for that. Otherwise, stay tuned. Trailers and more coming soon, hopefully. So, yay! All right, see y'all. Bye.